All right, so before we actually get into making functions in code, I want to take a step back and get you guys to really understand what a function is on a base conceptual level, okay? And I think this is very crucial, especially for people who have never coded before, to really step back and understand things as a concept before you try to put it into practice, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to open up this super complex program called Notepad, and we're just going to block off this code because we don't want to stress ourselves out and get overwhelmed. Let's just kind of censor that for now. There we go, a little more comfortable, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to write out a couple functions, okay? Now, I always tell people this, and it kind of sounds like a cheesy motivational speaker tagline, but it's true, okay? And that is that everyone is a programmer. You guys are all programmers. You just don't know it yet, okay? And that's because we use programming logic all the time in everyday scenarios, okay? The thing is, our brains mostly just do them subconsciously, so we don't really have to think about it. And this is a pretty cool concept that I try to instill in my students, and I haven't heard this expressed enough. But the secret to really getting comfortable with coding is to actually slow your brain down. A lot of people think it's the opposite, and they try to really speed their brains up and try to move a lot faster because a computer just goes so fast. But you actually have to slow your brain down and break things down to smaller steps and take things very slow, okay? So let's go ahead and do this a little bit. So I'm going to show you what a function is in essence, okay? So we're going to make a function. We're just going to call this function eat. Okay, so essentially what I've done here, I've said, okay, I'm going to make a function and I'm going to call it eat. Okay, and you can give a function any name you want. So let's just kind of think about this. What steps might be involved in a function called eat, right? We might have put food in mouth, chew food, swallow food. And we're just going to stop there, okay? So what you're seeing is this makes sense to you, right? I'm assuming everyone watching eats. I think we all know how to eat. We don't really have to be told how to eat, right? I don't have to sit here, and if I say, hey, I say, you want to go out to eat. I don't say, hey, do you want to go out and put some food in our mouth and chew the food and swallow the food and digest the food, right? Nobody says that. If you say that, that's fine. Whatever floats your boat, that's cool. But I personally don't say that. I just say, do you want to go eat? Okay, now we as people, we understand that the word eat encompasses a lot of smaller steps involved in there, okay? So, like I said, if this makes sense to you, you already understand what a function is. You do this stuff every day. We just don't consciously think about all the steps involved, right? You could say function drive to work, okay? I could say, okay, get in car, turn on car, drive to work, get out of car. And this could go on and on. You know, you could really go in depth with this. I could come in here and I could make a million of these for everyday things that we all do all the time, right? So if you understand this, you are on your way to being a programmer, I promise, okay? And then we could take it a step further. We could actually go ahead and kind of put in a little more code into this since we already understand the English part of it. We can go ahead and put our braces in, all right? So I'm going to put a brace there. At the end, I'm going to brace down here, okay? This is just saying, hey, this is the beginning of an eat function, and this is the end of the eat function. I'll do the same right here. This is the beginning of the drive to work function. This is the end of the drive to work function. See how that's working? It's just encapsulating it and say, okay, this is the function right here. So what you see is eat has 4 smaller steps involved. Drive to work has 4 smaller steps involved. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is if I say, what do you think is going to happen? Basically, when I say go ahead and do the eat function, okay, it's saying do all those steps involved. It's saying this one line of code right here, this one command, do eat, is essentially saying put food in mouth, chew food, swallow food, digest, okay? Alternatively, if I said do drive to work, what's going to happen? It's going to come down here and say, okay, let me get in the car, let me turn on the car, let me drive to work, let me get out of the car, okay? So basically what you've done is you created a how-to for the computer. You said this is how you eat. This is how you drive to work. And what this does, this saves us time. This lets us say in one word a bunch of smaller steps, okay? Now, think about the implications of this. You can make a function that has 1,000 lines of code in it, okay? That's a little crazy of a function. That would definitely be broken down a little more, but let's just think about that. We could have this really complicated function, right? And the issue is, if there was a bunch of times we did this, let me go ahead and make one of these out, okay? Okay. Let's just say there's a lot of lines of code in here. Okay, let's just pretend there's a whole bunch of lines of code in there. What this does for us, we can say do complicated thing, right? And that encapsulates 1,000 lines of code. And you might be thinking, well, why can't we just type out the lines of code right here? Let's think about this. Say there's another part in the code where you need that same thing to happen. The issue becomes that every time you wanted to do those 1,000 lines of code, you would have to rewrite those 1,000 lines of code. So you're bloating your code. That's the first problem, is you're putting all these extra lines of code in there. You basically doubled lines of code with just one simple section where you said, I wanted this to happen again, right? That's not good. You don't want to bloat your code like that. The other issue is if you want to change how that works, those 1,000 lines of code, if I just typed them all out manually, I would have to go change those lines of code every time I had done that, okay? So what's cool is if I change one of these lines of code here, okay, if I just added an extra line or something and say, taste the food, what happens is every other time that I have said do eat, it is going to do this new line of code in there every time I do that, okay? Because we're basically doing what we call a function call. We're saying call on this function and do it, okay? So when you ever hear me say call this function, all I'm saying is do that function. That's all that means. Nothing complicated, okay? It doesn't mean picking up the phone, calling it. It's just saying, hey, do that function, okay? So when I say call eat, I'm saying put food in mouth, taste the food, chew food, swallow food, digest. When I say call drive to work, it's saying get in the car, turn on the car, drive to work, get out of the car, right? So it's not that bad, right? This makes sense to most of you probably. This is stuff we do all the time, every day. We just do it very subconsciously, okay? And that's fine. It's one of those things we don't really think about. So like I said, slow your brain down. Start thinking about this. Start thinking about all the stuff you do on a daily basis too, okay? So now that we kind of have the concept down, the next video I'm going to really show you how to kind of put this into practice and kind of translate from this pseudocode into actual functioning C# code.